There's no going
So you
back.
can do what you wanna do. You already know. You can do what you wanna do.
Hello artists, it's me again, day 18 of 365. Today we're going to be talking about aspect ratio. Now this is quite a difficult one for some of us to understand because after all we are artists and not mathematicians. But what I've found a lot is that artists tend to, when they've got a source material that's printed out onto a piece of paper, they tend to enlarge it onto a larger canvas without taking into account the ratio of the size of the paper relative to the size of the canvas, and what ends up happening is that they get the drawing on the canvas gets stretched or distorted in some way. So I'm going to do it on my computer simply because it's quicker and easier to show you, and once we've done that, then we'll be able to see exactly how aspect ratio can affect your canvas, how to work out your composition according to your aspect ratio. Okay, so what you can see here is I've put a little photograph of Siobhan. It's the same one that we did the drawing of the other day. I've just placed it onto what would represent an A4 piece of paper. I'm working in a piece of software called Illustrator. For those of you who've got any graphic design background, you'll understand what that is, and this will make your job a lot easier. I will admit to having used this a couple of times to work out my aspect ratio. But what I've got next to it here is a representation of the size of my canvas. Now, as you can see, the size of the drawing, the size of the canvas are vastly different. Okay, I've measured the drawing, and what I've got here is a 200 by 270. This is in millimeters. Okay, that's the size of my drawing. I also happen to know that the canvas that I've got to draw on is a 762 millimeter by 1016 millimeter. Okay, now what I want to do is I want to end up putting the face of the child on this side of the canvas, so I've got a whole lot of spare space over here. It'll just make a nice composition, but I need to work out how I'm going to do that. So the first thing we need to do is find out the ratio of this canvas versus that piece of paper. Okay, so we're going to take the 762 measurement and we're going to divide that into the 1016 measurement. Okay, so if you grab your calculator, 1016 divided by 762 gives us a ratio of 1.33. Okay, so now we know that our short side relative to our long side is 1.33. That's a ratio, that is not a measurement. Okay, we're going to do a similar thing here, but I'm not going to work out the ratio of one side to the next. I don't need to know that. What I need to know is how that 1.33 affects my drawing, okay, or my composition. So I want to do this thing top to bottom. I've just drawn a bit of a red square here so we can see, give or take, how the drawing, the face, is going to fit into the size of the canvas. So what I want to do is I want to take my top to bottom measurement, which is 200. Okay, so and then I want to multiply it by the 1.33. So 200 multiplied by 1.33 gives me 266. So I want to make sure that that square is 266 millimeters long. Okay, so if we get rid of that part, I can place this on my piece of paper and I can see, right, I've got 266 long by 200 high, so that measurement there is no longer applicable. Okay, so now we can go ahead and draw our grid. Okay, so what I want is for the squares that I'm going to be drawing for my grid to be the same size relatively. Okay, it's no point in me drawing a grid on my drawing that's not going to be the same ratio relative to the canvas, otherwise then I'm going to end up with a distorted drawing. Okay, so the first thing I need to do now is figure out how big my blocks are going to be, the grid that I draw on my canvas. Now I don't often use a lot of squares, if I use any at all. The ultimate aim eventually by doing this exercise is to be able to draw freehand, but it's understandable that in the beginning you might have to draw a grid onto your canvas and onto your drawing to get your aspect ratio correct. So to start off with, I'm going to draw a grid of 127 wide. And the way that I work that out is I go 1016, divide that by 8, because I want 8 lines across. Okay, so I've drawn my first line down my canvas. We're just pretending that I'm drawing it on a canvas. and I've drawn that at 127 millimeters across. So I'm just going to repeat that process, and from that line measure another 127 millimeters until I've got my 8 lines across my canvas. Okay, so now I've got my 8 gaps. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. So that'll give me 8 blocks across. Now I need to do the same for the vertical measurement. So I've worked out that if I take the 762 millimeters, which is the height of my the narrow side of my canvas, should I say, and I divide that by 8, I need a grid size of 95.25. So I'm going to put my first line in at 95.25. Now, of course, again, you'll be working this out physically, not on a computer like I'm doing. I'm only doing this for purposes of this exercise. Okay, so I've drawn my first line in there at 95.75 millimeters up from the bottom to the first line. Now I need to duplicate that across my canvas. So you would just take your ruler, lay it on the line, measure another 95.25, etc. So let's do that quickly. Okay, so now I've drawn my horizontal lines as well across my up the short side of the canvas, and as you can see now, I've got a resulting little grid that is sort of an oblongish grid. So I've got to make sure that my original drawing, the photograph here, has a grid on it that is the same size relatively. Okay, it obviously won't be the same size because it's just a printout on an A4, but if I now just take my picture that I've got here, and I just divide that by 8 and divide the across by 8, I'm going to end up with a grid that's the wrong size. So what I need to do now is take the size of my picture that I want, not the size of the picture that I've got, and put a grid across that. So let's just get rid of these things here because they're in our way. We don't need them anymore. Okay, so now we've got the picture in front of us, and we're going to start drawing lines on those. Now we've got a grid of 8 going up the side. Now I want this photograph, I want the painting to include the whole photograph from the top to the bottom, so it's easy on the short side. I can literally just divide by 8 and put my 8 lines across. That's not a problem at all. So let me just do that quickly. I've got this as a height of 200, so 200 divided by 8 gives me 25. So I'm going to draw my 25 grid across, and I'll see you when I'm done there. Okay, so now I've drawn my horizontal lines. Obviously the top and the bottom of the picture will also have lines, so let's put those in, because that's now the top and the bottom of your canvas. And you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 spaces. Now I'm going to do the same thing across, but this is where the ratio comes in, because I don't know necessarily how far to the right hand side this has got to go, because my picture ends up here somewhere in the middle of the piece of paper. It's been cut off. So of course I'm going to draw my first line, which will be on the edge of the drawing, obviously. Okay, so now this is where my 1.33 comes in. We've got the height of our square at 25, but we don't know what the width of it has got to be yet horizontally, and we don't know where the end of the drawing ends on this side. So I'm going to have to now work out, relative to the size of this block, which is 25, how wide does my little grid square have to be? So it's quite simple. We take the ratio that we worked out from the big canvas, and we multiply our block size by that. So our block height was 25. We multiply that by 1.33, and it gives us 33.25. So now all I need to do is duplicate this vertical line by 33.25 across my canvas 8 times. And there we have it. I've duplicated it across. Now we can see that I've got nearly 2 squares worth of blank space that would not have normally appeared on my drawing had I not worked this out, and I wouldn't have been able to get the aspect ratio correct. Now, one of the most common mistakes that I see in art classes is exactly what I'm talking about here. People will take a drawing, a photograph. Let's just duplicate this here so I can simulate what's happening. Let's just say now you've gone to the printer and you've printed out your photograph, and that's the result that you've got on an A4 piece of paper, and you don't know how to do this particular little calculation and how to work out your grid, if you simply measured down here, divided by 8, put your grid across, measured across, divided by 8, put your grid down, you would end up with a grid that was incorrect. Okay, so now I've put the grid on that horizontal as well, so now we can see how vastly different the grid size is. Now the danger of this is that if you took this one here without working out your aspect ratio, you can see that the relative size of the blocks, so these blocks down here on this bottom one are almost square, whereas the blocks here on your canvas are quite rectangular. So if you took these measurements here and you simply used the blocks that are on your canvas and you now try to draw your drawing according to the grid, it's going to end up distorted. Now I'm going to simulate doing that. So as you can see, we're getting quite a lot of distortion there, and this is quite important. Okay, so let's do a quick recap. To work out our aspect ratio, we went long side of the canvas and we divided that by the short side of the canvas. In other words, the long side of the canvas is 1.33 times bigger than the short side of the canvas. So now it's quite easy on the drawing, because what we need to do is we either multiply or divide by the ratio to get the size of the blocks that we need. But we could have, if we'd wanted to, we could have divided the top of the drawing by 8 if that particular canvas or that particular composition lent itself to that. And then we would have had to do the opposite. We would have now had to divide by the ratio to get the short side. So remember, if you've got the long side, you divide by your ratio to get the short side, or if you've got the short side, you multiply by your ratio to get the long side. So there you have it. That's how you work out aspect ratio on your canvas. It will certainly help you to work out your proportions a lot better and to ensure that your drawing doesn't get distorted on your canvas. I hope that helps you. If so, please like and share and subscribe and do all the other social media stuff. And I look forward to seeing you in day 19.
Just what you wanna
Cheers!
do.